Great, thank you. Good morning, welcome to this session. I am Sylvia Weisborn, I'm the president of the International Communication Association. And here on the podium at this table, we have the members of the executive committee. So before we go into the conversation, I would like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves and give us a very brief description of how you got to where you are since the beginnings of your careers. If you can keep that to a minute or 2 minutes, that will be fantastic. So, Thomas, you want to start?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm Thomas Hanitsch. I'm president-elect. I'm from LMU Munich, Germany. My first ICA I attended in 2003, and at that time ICA was still very heavily dominated by Americans. So I was one of the very few international scholars, very few Germans at a conference, and I felt so alone. I didn't know anyone at a conference, and so I was wondering, and I'm a journalism scholar, I forgot to mention that, so my research is mostly in journalism. And at the time, ICA did not have a journalism studies division, and I was wondering, why is that the case? And so I asked a couple of people, and they said, well, nobody wanted to do the dirty work, and you need to collect signatures, and it takes some time and effort. And so, as I felt so alone at this conference, being this one of very few German scholars, international scholars, I felt like, well, why not creating my own community? And so I took the lead in organizing a move towards creating journalism studies, which was created the year after my first ICA conference. I was standing in front of all our new members at the inaugural ceremony of this new division, by the time interest group, and I just found my new family. And so that was my journey to get into ICA and to get affiliated with ICA leadership. And so the message that I connect with this story always is that at the time I founded journalism studies, I was, like most of you, I was a doctoral student, I was a junior scholar, I didn't even have a PhD at the time. And so what I'm trying to say is even junior scholars, early career researchers can make a difference in ICA, and would encourage every one of you to take part in the development of this association. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Hi, I'm Unju Lee. I'm from Seoul National University, and I'm the immediate past president of ICA. And the first ICA that I attended was in 2002 in Seoul, South Korea, my hometown. And back then, I was at the University of California, Davis, as assistant professor. And it's ironically after I returned to my alma mater, Seoul National University, in 2008, that I have become more involved in ICA. Because when I was in the US, then I was probably one of so many Asian communication scholars, but by being affiliated with Seoul National University, outside the States, I guess I became like a token minority. And then, well, sometimes I feel that I got invited to the leadership position because of my demographic background, being an Asian female, and also being located outside North America. And I have some ambivalent feelings about it because you don't want to be acknowledged based on your scholarly merit, because after all, ICA is an academic association consisting of all communication researchers, media researchers. So, but at the same time, I realized that if I can play a role as a token, and if I can attract more tokens to our group, that may be also a meaningful contribution that I can make to this academic community. And you probably were at the opening plenary just 2 days ago, right? But it feels like several days ago. But when you watched the video celebrating the 5th anniversary of ICA, there's so many people, now very senior scholars, shared their experience, their first ICA experience describing as overwhelming, right? Their responses were overwhelming, and I would even say intimidating. And ironically, and also you may or may not believe this, but I still feel that whenever I come to ICA, I feel overwhelmed and intimidated, but it really takes some courage for me to become involved in this position. But the starting point was not that, well, significant or huge. I got invited to review for journals as a reviewer, as an ad hoc reviewer, and I did my job very faithfully. And then they started inviting me to the editorial board, and after several years of doing it, I got appointed as the editor-in-chief of Human Communication Research, and then, invited to run for president. That was like 4 years ago, I guess, and that's how it evolved. So I would, just as Thomas said, there might not be many opportunities, or you might not see yourself as fitting for some important jobs in this humongous organization. But everyone starts with a very small step, but that can grow really big and meaningful.
Thank you.
Hi, hi, I'm Mary Beth Oliver, and so ICA presidents go through various names, you know, president-elect select, president, vice president, president. This is my last time. I think they call it president eject. But I definitely remember my first ICA. It was in Dublin, Ireland, and I couldn't afford to stay at the conference hotel, so I stayed at literally a nunnery, you know, nuns walking around, and I was really worried, you know, is it okay if I hang out with friends and have a drink and then go back to the nunnery? So it's been a beautiful number of years, and if you're just starting, you have so much to look forward to in your career here. And I just want you to know that, just echoing Ju talking about being overwhelmed or imposter syndrome or anything like that, if you feel that way, just know that you're not alone, and know that you are the future of this organization. I mean, we are relying on you to carry forth this wonderful mix of brilliant scholars. If you feel that way ever, and you see a person that you admire their work, or you go up to them, you know what? Don't feel shy, because they're going to feel complimented by your interest. So I hope you have a great rest of the conference, and I hope that you come to consider ICA as your academic home.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ingrid Bachmann. I'm from the Catholic University of Chile. Right now, I'm the president-elect select, so I'm just starting on this series of weird names. My first ICA was 2007. I had just finished my first year as a grad student, as a PhD student. I presented, I believe it was the Journalism Studies Division, which I have to say, it was a starting division by then, so it was pretty welcoming. I felt quite at ease presenting my research there. But a few years later, I started to go to business meetings. And I don't know, within 2 or 3 years, I was in charge of the Feminist Scholarship Division social media accounts, just because, I volunteered, I can do that. I know about Facebook, I can do that. And that's how I started. And in that sense, I will say it is pretty important to find your community. People like you can talk, engage, and all that. And there are those kind of opportunities. There are awards, there are organizing events. Sometimes it's something as simple as, I know how to put stuff on Facebook back in the day. So I will encourage you to find your community, find your people, and enjoy it. And I do remember I was also broke when I went to my first ICA. I didn't stay at a nunnery, but we were 7 people, grad students in just one single room. You make it do, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Nushir Contractor. I'm probably the oldest in terms of being my first ICA was in 1985. in Hawaii. And I remember that I stayed mostly in my room because right before I was at USC Annenberg School, and right before going to the conference, my mentor, Peter Manji, said, you know, I'm supposed to be a respondent in a session, but I think you might actually enjoy doing that. So I've asked the organizers if you could be the respondent instead of me. And I was absolutely both shocked and intimidated. And I spent the entire time in my room preparing notes and preparing, in those days, transparencies to get slides. This is before we had slide decks and computers to do this stuff. And after that, you know, the presentation went, I think, okay. But Peter said, never again do you come to your conference and then stay in your hotel room for the entire time preparing for something when you should be out networking. That stayed with me because I think one of the things I discovered very soon after going for that, even at that meeting towards the end of it, after I'd finished my presentation, is the realization that ICA is as much about listening to papers and learning from other people about papers as it is, as was mentioned, about building community. It is, remember that when you first arrived, when I first arrived, I'm like, oh, Klaus Krippendorf, who we celebrated a couple of days ago, was, I think at the time, either the president-elect or the president. And I remember seeing him like, oh my God, this is a god. And there were so many others that I had seen as, you know, people who were celebrities. And my first instinct was, I want to get to know them. But I learned over the years that actually just as important, if not more important, is to get to know your cohort. Because in your cohort are all of the people who are going to be sitting here in a few years from now. And you want to get to know every one of those individuals because you're like, oh my God, who knew that they were going to make us? We have these conversations all the time. You know, who knew that one day we were going to be running this thing or being involved in it, et cetera. I would also say that one of the things to do, as was mentioned, is try to get involved in ways you can. So spend time building networks, building community, learning about each other, but also look for small ways in which you can contribute. Facebook postings is an example of that. Try to volunteer if you want to be a reviewer. Try to volunteer if you want to start thinking about getting involved in small committees within each of these divisions. Ironically, Unju, when Seoul, ICA was in Seoul, was the year I was the program chair for the ORCOM division. So that was, you know, moving along, and I was a secretary first, and then I did that. And then just find new ways in which you could be involved, because the leadership of all the divisions and interest groups are looking for people to come up with fresh ideas. And so as you can propose them and get involved, that's a great way to start integrating into the ICA community. It's an opportunity to meet more people, for people to recognize you. And I just end by saying that perhaps I'm a little biased because I study social networks, but my dictum for people at early career, student and early career stages is, in the short term, you're making networks at places like ICA. In the long term, it's those networks that are going to make you. So, thank you.
Thank you.
That's so lovely and so true. And you know, so I'm Alicia Cohen. I'm from the University of Minnesota, and I'm the treasurer eject. And I would say ICA became my intellectual home in part because when I started as a graduate student, also at USC a few years after Nosh, and my cohort was really global and small but global. And so when I moved into my first job in early career, I was a student representative on some committees and was on the membership committee, on the internationalization committee, and then was eventually a journal editor for what became the Annals, Com Yearbook. But it allowed me, when I first had my first job, was at St. Louis University in the United States, and I was more in a smaller liberal arts kind of setting for my first job. And it allowed me to stay globally connected to my friends, and my peer group, and kind of extend it intellectually. And then I moved to a different university and move on. But I think that's what's so special about ICA. Now that I've been a director of a school of journalism for 8 years and was a department chair for 4 years. Now my colleagues back from my cohort are people like Ju-Young Jung, who's in Japan, and Jack Cho, who's at Nanyang and is a department chair now. Now we share those sorts of stories with one another and always reconnect at this conference. And we know each other's students and other people. And so it's a way to kind of keep yourself rooted and planted and thinking about the field more broadly and problems. You come to a conference and realize that you're small. You're just one little node in a network. But the problems at your university here is there. There's more in common than you think, you know, and moving from the local to the global is just so phenomenal. And I've always been intellectually curious, and I would just say to all of you, for those of you who are go to the other divisions and business meetings and that are just adjacent to what where you started, and that will become a really rich way for you to kind of expand your scholarship and learn new ways of doing scholarship from others, get social support in really hard times, and have friends around the world that you could have only imagined. So, that's what's so powerful about ICA, and so I'm treasure, and I just think that sustaining an organization like this is just a privilege to kind of help it thrive, because it's helped me thrive.
Thank you. I will just add a few personal things. Pretty much I second everything that has been said. Two things. First of all, that there is no single path to becoming I will say, happy with your career as a communication scholar or to be an ICA member. There's no straight path. Nothing in my trajectory was straight or predictable, anything like that. I came from Argentina to do graduate school here. I had a PhD in sociology. I realized that sociology had no room for media and communication, which is what I eventually found interesting. I gravitated towards ICA, communication department at University of California, San Diego when I went to grad school. Had a curiosity, tried ICA, and my first conference was 1989 in San Francisco. Felt like completely, you know, sort of fish out of water. I mean, just didn't know anybody, literally. Not even I think that my professors in the communication side were actually attending ICA. So and then things started happening, and then you start finding your community. Pretty much along the lines of what people have said. You have to try, you have to reach out, you have to make it happen, especially if it's not already there. If it's already there, that's great. But if it's not there, you have to figure out how to do it. And second is the unpredictability of things. It's not that when I was in grad school, I said, well, one day I would like to be in the executive committee of ICA, and that will make my life happy. No. Things happen along the way, you know. Opportunities come up, you have to be sort of paying attention and sometimes try to make opportunities happen, talk to people. The point that Nosh mentioned, you know, just come to the conference just to meet people, to talk to people, rather than just being, you know, solely focused on your presentation, because that's how you learn things, you learn new ideas, you figure out new things, and along the way you make, you know, friends and contacts and networks, and that's what carries you forward. Besides the, you know, the good work that you do. So I will say that. So now comes the time when you guys, if you have anything to ask us or an issue that we'd like to address, this is the moment. Thank you.
I'm curious, do you feel overwhelmed this first time? Because we keep saying that, and yeah, I'm like, maybe they're thinking, yeah. You might be like, I don't know what they're talking about. I feel great. And I'm also curious if it was like how you thought it was going to be like. Any surprise? Yeah, any surprises, anything you wish were different. Anything is fair game. So. We welcome any questions or observations at all that you might have.
Yep, in the back.
Might be a little tall. My tiptoes. Okay. There we go. Thank you for this. This is all so interesting and really excited to meet everyone here too. But I'm wondering if you could give an example of someone you connected with at this conference and then went to go on and collaborate with, and like how that came to fruition. I'd be really interested.
Yes. Who wants to go? Alicia?
So I would say I moved from St. Louis University to the University of Kentucky. I grew up in Kentucky, actually, but I had no contacts at the University of Kentucky. And so a lot of the people that I met at ICA, like Seth Knorr and Nancy Harrington, I met in the Health Comm division, later became people I wanted to work with. I got a job there and then collaborated with. I would say there were also people like, I haven't exactly co-authored with people, but I've supported their research or mine, like helped them write grants, other things like that. So you wouldn't see it in a publication of mine, but a lot of collaboration in that way. So, for example, Janice Krieger is someone that I've met here. Ashley Duggan is someone that I've met here. So she's in interpersonal. So people that are in adjacent divisions that can help me, you know, that I go to at ICA and say, hey, I'm working on this problem like this. So I think of collaborations even more broadly. A lot of my own work, though, is more kind of community-based. So I work with the people in community that I'm with, so it's not like an ICA partner, but I'm sure, I mean, global teams, other work.
I can give an example too. Quickly, this is a very good question, by the way, and I think sometimes we learn best by examples in terms of how we do this. So my story goes to when I was in grad school, and a classmate of mine now, it was at USC, but she was in what was then called Communication Arts and Sciences, Sandy Smith, who's now a very distinguished scholar in our field and has won all kinds of awards at ICA. She was a PhD student in Comm Arts and Sciences. I was at the Annenberg School for Communication. We ended up taking a grad seminar on organizational communication and also on research methods, became friends. I had a little bit more of a quant background with an undergrad in engineering, so I would help her with statistical assignments and statistical modeling assignments. Fast forward, she graduated a year before me, went to Purdue, and when she was at Purdue, she wrote me a handwritten letter, which I still possess and treasure, saying, oh, you know, I know when we were in California, we thought the Midwest was the frozen tundra and no one wanted to go there. I've spent 1 year, and the folks at Purdue are just so friendly. I really think you should think about applying to jobs in the Midwest. Do you mind if I tell my colleagues about you? No one knew me at the time. And they may want to interview you for a job. And I'm like, sure. And I went and got an interview there, ended up through connections there. One of the students there told their former advisor at Illinois. And so my entire job search was single-handedly put together by Sandy Smith, my classmate at USC, who was responsible for me cascading all of the job interviews that I got at that stage. And those are the kinds of things that you have to remember comes from your cohort. Yes, there were mentors who then played important roles in helping negotiate those deals, but it was my peer who was really instrumental, and I always acknowledge this and think it's important for all of us to see this.
One more, Alice?
Maybe I'm an oddball here in the sense that if you look at my CV, the publications list more specifically, then I was the sole author of most of my earlier publications, not because I wanted to do that, but because, well, we didn't have a graduate program back then. For the very first period of my tenure at UC Davis. So I had to work by myself independently. And even now, recently I have added some publications with some co-authors, but most of my co-authors are my own graduate students and some junior colleagues. But I think it's important, even though, well, of course, it's crucial for you to develop some collaborative skills and also create connections and create network and belong to a community. Still, at the same time, you have to stand on your foot first. You should be an independent researcher, and sometimes, and oftentimes in my case, they can find you too. So it's not like, I always find it very challenging and difficult, even now, to reach out to people. Well, I don't know if it's very popular in the States and other parts of the world, but in Korea, it's very common for us to say what MBTI type. Do you know what it is? MBTI? Okay. I'm an I, capital I, meaning that introvert, right? So I find it really difficult to talk about me, my self-promotion, right? And I still find it real awkward and odd and uncomfortable. So what I did, and I'm not saying that this is the sort of exemplary way of developing your career. It's just one example, one maybe example that's not quite typical. But in my case, I just tried my best to become a good, dependable, reliable researcher myself. And then, well, your research tells about you more than anything else. So in that sense, well, you keep publishing, you keep doing your research, and you create your own niche, right? And then, well, people who are interested in your work will approach you. So that's another way that you can develop some collaborative relationships.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Oh, you want to go?
If I might add just a little bit, because as we talked about collaboration, and I mean, I've become a communication researcher primarily as a collaborative researcher. So I'm doing comparative research. I collaborate with people from more than 100 countries and around the world. We are running a large-scale international project, Worlds of Journalism study, that has now done surveys of journalists in 75 countries. And that project has come about in ICA. So ICA, I have found ICA to be the fertile ground to recruit and other researchers and collaborate with them. So what I would like to encourage you to do is, depending on your research interests, don't hesitate to get in touch with colleagues with similar research interests. Those research projects, collaborative projects, come out of personal interaction. What I did when I was a very, very young researcher, I went to panels and I looked up the people who have similar research ideas, and then I went to the receptions and approached them. Because obviously after a panel, it's very difficult to talk to people because they're often surrounded by many fans. But at receptions, you might find much better opportunities to talk to people and build up networks. So one strategy, of course, is have other researchers come up to you and collaborate with you. But the other strategy that I would also like to suggest is to seek to reach out to existing large collaborative networks. And as far as we are concerned, we would never say no if someone comes up to us and asks, so, is it possible to incorporate another researcher? We do actually every year. We have at least 10 or 15 young researchers joining our network, so there's always space to accommodate more people. So don't be shy, approach people and establish connections.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sisanda Nkwala. I'm from South Africa. ICA is very big, and I think with all the different streams and interests, forming a community can feel a little bit overwhelming. So I'm wondering, and I think the previous speaker started to touch on my question, but maybe others can elaborate. I'm wondering what activities or actions in your association with ICA changed that sense of feeling like you're in this big pool, trying to find people, trying to find your community, and actually, feel like you belong. Like, what did you do physically, practically, to shift that? I find, for example, with the panels, sometimes you don't really, like you're saying, there's a lot happening and you don't get to speak to the person. You go to the reception, you don't know who's who, you see all these names, So what practically did you do to build that community, and maybe any points that were a shifting point for you from being this overwhelmed new person in this community to feeling like it's your academic home?
Great question, thanks. Ingrid?
Yeah, I get it. It is hard, and especially if you're kind of young and don't know everything. I'm going to start with an anecdote. So when I first started attending ICA, my research had to do with media coverage of female politicians. I could submit my research to journalism studies, to political communication, or to the feminist scholarship division, among others, but in terms of the theories and the topics and all that. I went to the poster sessions. I went around and I started to see where like my specific approach will fit better. And I'm still a member of all those 3 divisions, by the way. But eventually I found out that the way that I was addressing this topic was more in line with the discussion that was going on in the feminist scholarship division. And that's why I started going to that business meeting and I started to talking to those people, presenting to those. And I will actually talk to people presenting at the poster sessions. I've had some of the most amazing conversations there. I've actually gotten collaborators from those instances, like, okay, the person, I mean, I presented it at posters myself, at poster sessions, just talking with the person next to you, like, oh, that's a good research. Oh, you too. I'm like, how do you do that? And then I started developing. So there is that. They're like, I mean, the poster session on themselves, they are meant to be a conversation and like a one-to-one kind of thing. So there is that. The receptions are also good. I mean, alcohol always helps. You don't need to drink alcohol, but I mean, people go to these things not to talk about research. They go to talk, to engage, to have fun. So those are your spaces. So those are some of the ones that I would recommend. Also consider other venues that some divisions have. There are escalator research sessions. There are mentoring programs. Sometimes they invite people to be part of, say, a committee, like Article of the Year, stuff like that. So you might consider also joining those instances because you will work with other people and you will get more familiar with your community and all that. But again, I will start with poster sessions.
Thomas?
Thank you. A very practical suggestion that I have is that some of you might have noticed that many papers that are presented at this conference, for instance, have come out of conversations at the previous conference. So what I would like to encourage you to do is to use this conference, for instance, to find people to collaborate with, make plans for papers, for panel submissions, and you submit them by November 1st, and then you're going to be with them at the next conference. So this is a way to create a small little family, a point of crystallization, and you can expand it at the following conference. So do not expect to generate a large network in just 2 years' time, but it takes time, year by year, to grow your network. And the best way of doing it is to actually collaborate on papers with scholars with similar interests.
And this is actually a very practical advice for you. And I see that there are 2 representatives for the Students and Early Career Scholars Advisory Board. So you may want to start from there.
So again, in the spirit of very tactical sort of advice on how to do this, one of the things that our assumption is that when we think about networking, especially when we are new, this is very common across the board. We go to someone that we meet and our first instinct is, I wonder what this person can do for me. Or especially if you have a senior person or a senior scholar, you go, oh my God, I wonder, why would this person even want to talk to me? Because I have nothing to offer them. So I'm going to, again, go back to the research that we do in the area of social networks to answer that question 2 ways. One is, everything changes. If you feel awkward and embarrassed to say, because you're guilty of saying, I'm going to this person, like, what can this person do for me? If you change that in your mindset and not ask yourself internally what that person can do for you, but what you can do for that person. So you start asking them questions about what interests them, what are the kinds of things they do, and all of a sudden, it becomes so much more, it becomes less icky, to use a technical term, to have a conversation with someone and don't for a minute think that you don't have something to offer a senior scholar. There's a lot of research that shows that, and I'll say this from my own personal experience, but from research, if a senior scholar doesn't have mentors who are 30 years or 35 years younger than them, they are doing something wrong. A lot of the people that I consider my mentors are my students today. I learn from them, and there's a lot that you have to offer people who may be 30 years older. So don't assume like, oh, there's nothing I can offer them. There's a lot of things, whether it's technology, insights, pop culture, examples of this kind or the other in our field. So tactically, approach anyone, senior or your peer, not with the mindset of what she or he can do for you, but what you can do for that person. And the research shows everyone benefits. This is not a religious, altruistic recommendation I'm giving to you. We all benefit when we take that attitude in it.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, everyone. I hear every one of you, and yes, it is overwhelming. My first time attending ICA. I'm a PhD student from Toronto, but at the same time, it's amazing to see that there are so many people in the world who are interested in media and communication, and it feels great. So my question is, I know there are student representatives, but is there any student group existing here? Or kind of, is it based on division, or so what kind of opportunities are there for students? Thank you.
Hi, sorry being a little bit late to come into the room, but yeah, there is student representative for every division, and then if you have questions, you know, you can always just like email them or reach out to them on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Twitter, like they probably have some form of like social media presence. So you can reach out to them. And then on the higher level, there is the Student and Early Career Advisory Committee that oversees the student representative, which is what the two of us and some committee member do. So we'll talk more about that in the next session. But yeah, this session is to orient you towards like the overall ICA. But we do a lot of things for students, like putting out like programs that is specifically for professionalization for students, et cetera. So yeah.
Just wanted to hop in to add that everyone is welcome here. You all belong to different divisions, and there's not a you're not less belonging as a student than you are as a faculty member. You all have the potential to produce the same type of high quality research and participate in all levels of the association. And my encouragement would just to be bold, and when you go to the division meetings, ask, and you can go through your student representative, but you can also just ask the division chair or vice chair, I'd like to be a paper reviewer next year. I'd like to be on a committee and learn more about it. I promise you, no one will tell you no. They will be so excited to help orient you to it. So just remember, you all belong, you've all paid your membership dues, and there's a place for you.
I think one more thing I would like to say that has been a big helpful for me, that is maybe not so formal in our roles, is participating and finding the pre-conferences. So there's a lot of informal organization happening in pre-conferences. They are smaller. They're focused on specific methods, specific topics, and you have the opportunity to more deeply connect with people before everyone arrives and we are drowned, right? So for the first times, I think pre-conferences are also good.
Hi, good morning. I am Julie Arnold. I'm the Director of Member Services and Governance with ICA. Just kind of adding on, Cecilia and Daniela are two board student and early career representatives, and they talked a little bit about SECAC. They put together a great poster with a student track, which is at the top of the escalators when you go towards Reg. Definitely take a look at that because it has things that are geared towards helping you connect and network. And one other note, if anybody feels shy about reaching out to their division interest group reps or leadership, I always offer, feel free to email me and I'm happy to connect you.
Good morning. I also came in a bit late, so I apologize if this was brought up, but I would like to ask you about, to build up on the division discussion, could you share examples from your experience about how interest groups and divisions help you to build that network, build that community? And also related to that, I often feel like my research kind of cuts through divisions and it doesn't really belong to any particular one of them. So I already have a bit of a, well, there's a wonderful word in Swedish which is like decision anxiety. So I have a bit of that, trying to understand which division to approach, because it feels like a big thing, right? If you're investing your time, if you're willing to commit, it's like you have to show up, but none of them really perfectly matches. So like, there are two parts to my question. Thank you.
Who wants to take it?
Thanks for a great question. And I understand the overlapping interests and division groups, and especially when you're not all that familiar with what the division does. And I'm just echoing what a lot of people said: go to their business meetings. That's like huge. And then you'll learn a whole lot about how they see themselves, you know, as a division, and going to panels. And if you keep going to the same panels, you know, same divisional or interest group panels, you're going to start seeing the same people, you know, over and over again. You know, and I'll say that as a presenter, that happens too. So, like, a couple of decades ago, I was focusing specifically on white racism and the media, and I would always find myself on a panel with the same guy, you know, and we were always like, hey, good to see you here, you know, and that's one where we ended up collaborating. So, you know, just kind of hit those hard right now, and it'll sift through. But with that said, I still find myself split between various divisions. So if, you know, so if somebody's interested in children and media, for example, they might go to CAM, to the children and media division, but they might also go to something like the mass comm division, you know, or the gaming division if they're interested in children and gaming. So hit them hard, kind of go through the program after the fact too, and try to pull out the things that look a lot like you. That would be my best advice.
And also, you don't have to feel completely and ultimately committed to a single division, because it changes over time too, depending on your research trajectory. So in my case, for instance, I started submitting papers mostly to information systems. Back then, I was studying computer-mediated communication, and it was more about the processes, which cuts across different contexts. So I found information systems was the best fitting division for me. But over time, I kind of moved into other, of course, communication and technology division. And also, well, as I started studying disinformation, mass comm division, and political communication could be my intellectual home as well. So don't feel that you are betraying your home division when you submit papers to other divisions and interest groups. And we, ICA headquarters, actually promote interdivisional sessions, making it like highlight sessions of the conference. So please feel free to transcend the divisional boundaries.
I will add that the way I see this issue, especially if you're not, you know, definitely committed to a single topic or area of interest, whatever it will be, games or health communication, but if you hover around different areas that fit, there are two issues here. One is your own research interests keep evolving, and it's a matter of access or sort of accent or emphasis. It could be this, it could be that, even so that overlaps with, let's say, 3 divisions at ICA. And the other thing that is different, that is changing, is the divisions themselves in terms of the topics and who is there and what is happening. So once I realized that, is that basically it's up to you to figure out what is the best match, even for a conference or for particular projects, in terms of your own evolving interests, as well as what is happening within sort of specific divisions. But also, there are new divisions and sort of interest groups. And that's another way in which you can figure out where you fit in this, you know, large organization, that you are not stuck or committed necessarily for whatever amount of time to a single one. My case is that I started in political communication. Back in the day, political communication was primarily US centered. There were very few people doing whatever we can consider political communication research outside of the US. This was in the late 80s. So it wasn't clear that it was the best home for me, even though in principle it was the home for the work that I was doing. And then I tried the international section, the international communication section, which is the predecessor to what is called today global communication. And I felt there that it was more of a sense of more of an international aspect, but neither one was exactly what I was trying to do back in my dissertation days. So then things kept evolving. So I still stand that that's basically what may happen to many of you, not to all of you. To all of you, you will be very happy in one division, and that's basically your world and your community.
So just very quickly to summarize some points that were made here. One is loyalty is not a virtue to a division. It's okay to date multiple divisions. The second point I'd make is, again, underscoring some of the examples, you often will find a community that is not a visible division, but what I would call an invisible division. So I started out in organizational communication, and then, since I was interested in technology, I had some affiliation with CAT at the time, and now human machine communication. Also, because I'm interested in methodologies, I also have with COM methods. What is interesting is that there is a core group of people that I will see, just as Mary Beth was saying, that form that particular niche, that work in that invisible community across OrgCom, ComTech, human machine communication, and COM methods. By the same token, I know people in OrgCom who are, in addition to OrgCom, will find themselves with the feminist group or with critical theory or PhilCom, and that's another invisible community or invisible division, if you may, of people. So that's what I think you should try to look for, that niche. And I think Sylvia's point is very well taken. It's not only your interest that changed, the division interest changed. When I started in 1985, information systems was mostly about methods. And then all of a sudden it moved in different, we talked about attitude change and change in different ways, went neuro for a while, and now it's again in a different area, and many of what it did is now being done in COM methods or is being done by the health biology division, et cetera. So.
One addition, because the question was also, how do you build community? And just as an example, when you're submitting to all these different places, when you're on a panel, look to your right and left. You'll have scholars of different levels and interests. And in my case, I was studying communication inequality and media strategies to improve cancer communication. And so I'd be on a panel frequently with Vish Viswanath or Michael Slater or some other people from different universities. Those people eventually became my tenure letter writers and tenure and promotion writers. They're people who, they were interested in my work because I was new and was just doing something a little different. And I had so much to learn from them. So while I wasn't on, you might have saw this in the video, I mean, they were like celebrities to me. Over time, they've become, I mean, people that I have lunch with every once in a while and stuff. So, you know, it's okay after your session to, if you're talking about something, to engage. Early in my career, my first years, I was too scared, I think, to engage sometimes. But one thing I would do when we had stuff, I would also reach out before the next conference and say, you know, I have this paper from my research. We're thinking about putting together a panel. And if you put together a diverse panel, it's more likely to get accepted within a division than if it's a panel from within one institution showing up. And so that's a way to build your kind of intellectual community over time in ICA, and that can be really wonderful for your career.
Thank you. Next question? Yep, over there, under the back.
Hi, good morning. I'm Hyacinth Banghero, and I'm from the Philippines, but sitting at Bowling Green State University. And first of all, thank you very much for putting this panel. This is very thoughtful of you. My question would be, like a lot of us here are first-time attendees and probably alone coming to ICA. So if you like walk back, what would be like the advice you will give to your first attendee self to make the most out of this experience? Because this is a critical time to decide whether we should go back again next year and for the next years.
Great question. Yes? Everybody's thinking? Alicia?
Try to find a buddy here, but in this room, or, you know, when you're a student, often students sit with other students in the division, and you're all kind of doing the same thing because the other people are catching up and giving each other hugs, and you're brand new, and that can be, but if it's not someone from your PhD program, or if it's not someone from the country you're with, maybe it's just someone that you're seeing if you've gone to 2 panels in a row and they're just next to you. Or so if you could find a buddy and go to that and then kind of go from there, you know, because I think that it's the reason we're here physically in person as opposed to remotely is because there's something about being together, you know, in person and being able to talk. So once you realize that all students are feeling that same thing, although even if they're from if you're a student from a university where you happen to have more than one person here, the other person might be in a totally different area and going to visit different division stuff. So often there's only one or two people, you know, there's not a lot of people from the same university visiting the same session or going to the same division. So I would encourage you to just try to, and then sometimes during those socials, there's that opportunity. And so I do think that it's just kind of, you know, getting your internal extrovert going if you can, and just you know, trying to make conversation with people and let people know, say, I'm new. What do you love about, you know, coming here? Because all of us will talk about what we love about ICA, so that's easy.
Next question.
Just also a reminder, there's a ribbon for first-time attendees, and I often see more seasoned ICA goers reach out to people that have their yellow first-time attendees, so it helps you connect that way and also with each other.
Hi, this carries on to the question that he asked. How intentional are you about going to presentations that aren't in your division? Because I find it very easy to think like I'm not actually even in academia. I work in local government, but I'm interested in communications. And environmental communications seems like the most nominally fitting you know, presentations to go to, but then I'm worried I'm missing some interesting ideas that could still apply to what I do just because they're not under the environmental label. So I was wondering, how intentional are you about trying to go to something that you don't think will apply to you just based off reading it, and then, you know, just trying it out and seeing what it's like?
Well, divisional identity can be one thing that you can sort of identify which sessions or which papers you would want to hear about. But at the same time, you can do some keyword search. There's a conference program, which is enormous, but by doing some keyword search, you may be able to locate something outside your key division that has something relevant to your own personal interest. And also, once you become a little bit more familiar with the sort of major players in the domain, then you can use their names for search as well. So,
somebody else? Ingrid?
Who was first? I try to make it short. So going to different divisions, I'm not particularly intentional about. Sometimes it's just a matter of change because I come across something that you know sparks my interest. But I have made multiple experiences where I found going to other divisions intellectually extremely inspiring. I remember one situation when I was a very young researcher. I was working on the concept of journalistic culture, and I had something about roles and something about epistemologies, and I wanted to have an ethics dimension. I'm not an ethics scholar, so, and I was really desperate for some kind of approach that I could use in my own research, and I went to the I think it's the communication philosophy division, and there was a colleague who presented a paper on ethical ideology. So, and I was like, wow, that's it. That's what I need. And so beyond the networking aspect, going to other divisions, to sessions from other divisions is extremely fertilizing, cross-fertilizing your own research. You learn something that you would probably not learn if you stick to your own divisions. And so I would really encourage you to do that as much as you can. At the same time, considering that your time is limited and you cannot go to all kinds of divisions, but you know, trying to stick your head out of the box at least for once or twice at a conference is extremely helpful.
Yeah, I'll just say, yeah, I think what I do myself is look through the program at, you know, just to see what's relevant. It's not always in my division at all. You know, it's kind of like, I've noticed that in other academic disciplines, like they tend to, and I'll use psychology as an example, they'll tend to cite primarily other psychologists, and I appreciate that. I don't appreciate it when they're having a paper about media psychology that they're only but you know, when I go and do a literature search, I don't care if it's on topic, if they're, you know, an anthropologist saying something that I think is relevant, or somebody who's in philosophy, for example. If it's, you know, if the topic is of interest, it is. And so I would say the same thing about divisions. You know, look for people, look for papers that look like they would be interested regardless of division. That's what I would say.
Ingrid, you want to go?
Just to add to that is, yeah, I mean, that's part of why the whole ICA experience is so overwhelming, is because you have like 10,000 things to see, to attend, and all that. I remember my first ICA, I tried to do that, and I was like 15 minutes in one session, 15 minutes in another. Like, by the end of the first day, I was exhausted. So you have to be selective. And keywords, as Unju mentioned, sometimes it's just go with people that you identify. And sometimes, like, yeah, go to other divisions. Like, you cannot do everything, and I know that it's overwhelming, but be selective, and you can follow the people afterwards. You can, okay, this is, I mean, I'm gonna follow this person's, I mean, I'm gonna check their Google Scholar or something like that, or their LinkedIn. You can reach out to see what they are working on later on. It's not only here. I mean, this is where you might find out about them, but you don't have to be at every single session because, I mean, there's not enough time, period.
Yeah, that's like a hidden curriculum. So I remember my first ICA was between when I was a master and PhD student, and it was in San Francisco. And like I stayed with my grandparents who lived in San Francisco, and I like attended every session. I didn't know. So my advice is to find 2 sessions that are paper sessions that you're passionate about. Find one, something that's fun to do, whether it's our ice cream social tomorrow or something that looks fun in the program. And then maybe one business meeting, like, you know, kind of get a little bit of ICA variety would be, and maybe stop by the poster session and just walk around. You know, you don't have to go from session to session to session.
If I can address a topic that has not been asked yet, but I will think that probably is relevant to many people in this room, that if you're an international student or early career scholar, you're doing all kinds of other level of learning at the same time that you're doing everything else that we just said, because everything is different, because everything is new, because you have to probably do all this in English, which might not be your first language. So all that kind of learning, I think that is part of the process as well. The great news is that there are lots and lots of people exactly like that. And it is in that sense, this organization is very different from what it was 40 years ago. In that sense, that was more rare, let's say. Right now, it's like there are lots of people who in many ways, we are international, we are from somewhere else, we interact with people from even different places. So you're not alone, that at the same time you're trying to figure out what kind of scholar you want to be, where is your community. In a way, it's a more personal, biographical question of why I'm doing here, right? And that is also part of the process. And the good thing is that you can have conversations about that, what does it mean to be an international student or scholar, with other people who came from somewhere else, not from where you come from, and are dealing with exactly the same questions. So just that is something else that you can engage with that will be part of your sort of formation, your sort of growth as a scholar.
Thank you very much for this thoughtful panel. My name is Triza Ombewa. I am a graduate student at Indiana University Media School. Originally from Kenya, now that you've mentioned international students. And one of the dynamics I'm currently dealing with probably is listening to many voices. And one of the things I actually had a friend say, even as I came here, was in regard to the kind of research that you do. And one of the concerns was if you focus too much on the country you're coming from,
it's going to be a disadvantage when you get into the job market. How do you navigate such kind of dynamics in terms of how do you expand the kind of research that you want to do? Because, for example, I come from Africa, and I usually say it is our business to tell the African stories. It is for us to do the African researches. But since I've been given a scholarship to be here, then it seems to be more leaning towards you need to do a bit of more of research in the US so that you're also marketable in the job market once you're done. What kind of advice would you give an international student in that regard?
Anju?
That's actually a question that I have been struggling with myself because maybe from a different perspective, because I do research in Korea with Korean sample, but the research topic and the research method that I'm using to analyze the data and report the things, I don't think they are different from what the most American scholars who are operating in my domain do. So sometimes I have to stop and think, okay, I'm an international scholar by location, right, and also by identity, but do I add any diversity to the scholarship? Or am I contributing to the globalization of communication scholarship? To be honest, I'm not quite sure because, well, even as an editor of human communication research, well, I had trouble with this question because, well, in the area that I'm researching, well, I don't really see if it is legitimate or necessary or desirable to expect something different from the scholars who are dispersed geographically. Because, well, from the sort of scientific tradition, well, the answer, there's only one correct answer no matter who does the research, right? So that's something that I have been struggling. And in my case, actually, it could be a little different in the sense that I never had in Korea in the title of any of my research, because even when I collected data from South Korea, still my research is more sort of fundamental theoretical aspects. So I didn't really feel that it was necessary, and it was even misleading in my view to highlight the location when the findings that I report have little to do with any sort of idiosyncratic qualities of Korean population or Korean society. But it's because the type of research that I'm running is not sort of rooted in some peculiarities of Korean society, Korean culture, or Korean communication systems. But if your research question has more to do with such sort of special, unique aspects of different cultures, different media systems, then that will be quite different. So.
Yeah, if I could add, just like Anju, I've been wrestling with that question since day one, since I was in grad school, right? And I think part of the reason is, you can say, yes, follow your passion. That's non-negotiable. Follow what you feel more strongly about. If it is issues related to whatever aspect of communication where you come from, that's what you should do. But then you need to ask the question, who you're writing this for, who you want your audience to be, what theoretical argument you're making, how you're trying to participate in certain debates in a given field, health communication or science communication, whatever it may be. And then it's a question that's sort of the community that you want to be part of, people who are interested in, I don't know, AI and journalism, environmental communication and entertainment formats, whatever the topic is. And it happens that you are studying, as the case, from country X or from country Y. That is a way in which you make your work relevant and you bring your passion into something that people beyond the country that you're interested in, or let's say the country that you're from, will care about. And you have to make that effort. In some ways, it is a question of translation. Then there is a question of, will they care? And you have to try to make sure, yes, you should care about this. Why? Because I'm bringing this original point. or what applies in some context doesn't apply to this context. Or this theoretical point is grounded on a very limited sort of evidence base that belongs to certain countries and doesn't apply to communities that I'm studying. And that is the work. That is part of the work to make it happen. And in some ways, it is a more visible question, a more visible, I will not say concern, but I mean something to think about, that for other scholars who are not in that sort of biographical position. But I find it extremely enriching. I don't find that as a challenge. I find that that is the job. That is how you say, this is why my work matters to people who are interested in whatever the questions, the theoretical research questions are.
I do have scholarship that has in Appalachia, Kentucky, and published in some high-impact journals. I would say that there is a relationship between reach and impact that you need to think about with your work. Your work also needs, and you'll have to make the decision on it, but here's how I've done it when I've studied in a local context. If you're talking about your particular community that you're working on, that's very important because maybe that's work that only you can do based on your position as a scholar, and that can be very impactful work. It also is work that might not have the reach that it might otherwise be. It might have lower citation count, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have impact. It has incredible impact in that. But then you might also be able to write more theoretical pieces. For example, when I was after doing an intervention in doing work in Appalachian, Kentucky, I've written a broader piece on designing for dissemination. So kind of broader, that's kind of what are the learnings that are more global? Where's the portable knowledge? That, I think, and so doing both things in your work can broaden the reach while you're not giving up on the local and important cultural impact that you might want to have as a scholar. So when I'm mentoring graduate students, I say do the work that only you can do. If you're coming from a country that has been historically underrepresented in our journals, and there's some really important local knowledge about communication that can be very impactful that only you can do it. Do it, and everyone will see you for doing this impactful work in this area. And at the same time, help connect your work to the globe if you can by figuring out the reach question too. And so that's the challenge, and we struggle with it. But don't let anyone tell you not to do work that you're passionate about and impactful just because they say why are you just focused on this population or whatever. Don't listen to them. You'll find a home for your work.
Can I just had one tactical experience-based. Thank you again for that question. It made me reflect on myself because I came from India and I arrived at USC and I thought I was going to study development communication but connected to India, and found soon after I arrived that no one on the faculty at Annenberg at the time was doing that. What I did was, and this is a pragmatic way of going at it, I made lemonade of the people who were there. And I found that there were 3 people there who were really well-known scholars in the area of social networks, communication networks: Everett Rogers, Peter Manji, Ron Rice. So I spent a lot of my apprenticeship while in PhD school learning a lot about these theories and these methods and banking some of the ideas of when to apply it. And it was not until about 20 years later, after I got tenure and made full, that I got a chance to do 2 major projects in India and then one in Kenya. That was funded through the Melinda Gates Foundation, where my value add was exactly all the expertise I'd learned on social network theories in grad school. So sometimes it may be that there's a pragmatic way to say, I'm going to take what I can now and then see when and if the opportunity comes back to be able to return that to my country of origin or the global south generally.
Thank you. Just a brief addition. I think that's an incredibly important, relevant question you asked, and I agree with everything that's been said, that there's a lot of things you can do as an individual, but I do think that the answer to this question primarily lies with us as a community. ICA, as a scholarly association, has 50% membership in the US, so there you see where most of the members, or a big chunk of the members, are. we can still do better in terms of recognizing the value of research coming out of countries in the Global South. And when I joined this association, it's been much different from what it is now. So I would always have to defend my study. Why do you do this research in Germany, and what does it add to the international knowledge by and large? So I always had to make a case for my study to be relevant to international scholars. This has changed quite a bit, and you can also see, if you look at the composition of the people sitting here in front of you, ICA has actually come a long way of making this change, but I do think that there is still room of improvement. And I do see a lot of recognition among my colleagues to say, we can do and we must do better. So reviewers are getting educated in terms of recognizing the value of studies from other countries. Editors pay a lot of attention to this, much more than they did in the past. So I would say there's still some space for improvement, but we are on a good way.
Thank you. We have, I think, 2 minutes, so we have time for one question and a few brief answers. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you for your time. So I have very practical question, each of you, if it's possible. So I'm Kangchum Gnamsra. I'm master's student at Michigan State University. So my question is, after the conference, how do you reflect or organize your thoughts or the information or network and contacts you gained during the conference? So if you have of course many experience, so it would be great if you share your experience and advice. Thank you.
Thank you, great question. Thoughts, brief thoughts?
I wish I were ever as organized as you are. So I never even thought about that. So it's usually the good vibe, and also the good, how should I say, the motivation to do better work that I bring home after conference. So I never really thought about, okay, organizing context.
Everybody has their own thing, you know. I carry around, you know, an iPad and just take notes and sometimes pictures of slides, but I highlight things that I learn or want to pursue. And I've been taking, well, I've met a lot of new students, new members. I'm not shy about saying, can I take your picture with your name tag? You know, so I know who, I can, you know, follow up with you and remember, you know, so for what that's worth.
If I will describe it, I mean, to me, coming to a conference 4 or 5 exhausting days is like the largest brainstorming session. You go to places, you know, panels, and you talk to people, and you always like, ideas come to you. Find whatever way to, you know, put them in whatever, paper or whatever the equivalent will be, because that's a way of saying, this is what I'm learning, rather than just something that occurred to me as I was listening to somebody or as I read something, or, you know. So that is what a conference is about. At least one of the main sort of benefits is exactly that. It keeps you thinking, it gets your creative juices going, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, in addition to all of that, what I do sometimes, well, sometimes I do collect emails, and I email people like, oh, I'm the person who was talking to you about this and that, and just to share a few things. And most of the time what I do, I create Google Scholar alerts for certain people I met there. So it's like, oh, I have to follow this person's work. I wasn't aware of that. The algorithm is not that great after all. So there's those things, but there's also like this, because I usually have a very long trip back home. I usually, I mean, while I'm waiting on the plane or just waiting to board, I have like a list of my main takeaways, like my lessons learned in the conference, and sometimes it's just like 3 ideas, but those get the ball rolling for like new ideas, so there is that as well.
One thing, quick thing.
There's actually a post-conference survey that you need to fill out.
That's true. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we run out of time. Of course, we're available to talk. Just, you know, let us know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. Thanks to everybody in the executive committee. So.